everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Elements of Fun. I am one of your hosts, and joining me is, of course, my lovely girlfriend and co-host, Courtney. Did I say my name? I'm Joey, by the
No,
way.
you
In
didn't.
case, if you didn't already know or can read this little guy here, I am Joey. But like I said,
And I'm Courtney.
what's going on? And if you are new to our channel, just a little background. We are a couple. We are a long distance couple, so that's why we kind of stream here, and we'll do a lot of adventures in person, but we also do some reviews and just talking about certain things, mostly Disney based, but not all Disney based. But tonight we're mostly Disney based, as we're going to be talking about some of the Disney Plus documentaries that have come out over the last 3.5 years now. I've felt since release that the documentaries that they've been bringing out have been bangers, and we're especially going to focus on the two recent ones, the Beach Boys and Jim Henson Idea Man. So, but before we get to that, since I haven't seen you in about a week, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It was a long, short week. Because it is the week after Memorial Day. But just working, and my niece had a dance recital, so that was fun to go see yesterday. So yeah.
Very cool. And you were in town here, so
I know I did go visit you.
Yeah, so we were talking about I did record some video. Well, maybe we'll put some of that out real soon because we did some fun stuff. It'll be a short video, but maybe I'll put it out in clips or on our shorts or something because it was a lot of fun. We did some cool stuff and great scenery. So, but yeah, maybe I'll put that out soon. But let's talk about some of these Disney Plus documentaries. Do you want to talk about some of the older ones first or get straight to the new stuff? What do you think?
I think we should talk about the new ones first, and then we can get into the older ones, just because they're so fresh in our minds right now.
That's true. And I felt like I watched them both yesterday as of recording. And I know you watched them both today. So let's start with the one that came out first, the Beach Boys. So before we get to this one, what do you have like I don't want to say a relationship, but like a history with the Beach Boys at all? I mean,
yes, I do. Okay. I knew quite a few of their songs. My dad loves them. We would listen to their albums all the time. And actually, I think he tried to go see them at the Mid-State Fair one time.
Oh, nice.
They were there. So, yeah. And also, I grew up watching like Full House, where John Stamos has a very close relationship with the Beach Boys. And so Uncle Jesse, sang a lot of Beach Boys songs on the Full House, and even performed with the Beach Boys, in where the whole cast got to go up on stage with them. And also Uncle Jesse's biggest hit forever is a Beach Boys song. So that's kind of mostly my main familiarization with them is from.
Well, that's cool. I think he even like recently, and when I say recently, it's within the last like couple years, but actually performed with them again.
He's been performing with them for years, or 20 years or so. He kind of steps in and does the drumming whenever their drummer can't come. So,
that's cool.
Yeah.
Same with me. I grew up, as early as I can remember, always listening to the Beach Boys tapes, and I think my dad even had like an 8-track, but mostly tapes. I mentioned I did a post on my personal Instagram page, but it was like, one of my earliest memories, our favorite early memories, was when we would drive down from Northern California down to like Disneyland in San Diego, because we used to stay at the KOAs all the time when we'd go on vacation, and a lot of those drives would be just blasting me and my sister blasting the Beach Boys in our motorhome on the way down, and
good road trip songs.
Oh yeah, perfect road trip songs. And it's like, and at kind of a little preview, but you of the documentary, but it's like their music is timeless and ageless, and so it was a big part of growing up, and even then the big part of, teen years. And anytime you go to the beach or something summer, once the
Yeah,
sun comes out, you want to listen to the Beach Boys, whether you're at a
exactly.
lake or something. So, and like you
It's that
said, Full House.
surfing. Yeah, it's a surfing culture of California.
Exactly.
Mm,
And
the
so
warm
then,
weather comes out, you want to listen to the Beach Boys.
yeah. And never, being that we're both from California, I mean, one thing I didn't really realize as much was when they were talking to the one producer, and I'm jumping into the documentary right now, but
Mm,
they're talking about one of the producers from Detroit. I should have wrote his name down, but he's a pretty iconic producer, and he was like, I mean, they were the sound of everybody wanting to go to California. They
mhm.
they they represented the California dream, and for
Yes.
everybody that lived. There's a one guy for One Republic from
Oh yeah,
Oklahoma.
Ryan Tedder. Yeah.
Yeah, so but one thing I was really excited to see about this documentary was it was co-produced by Frank Marshall, which I was telling you. He's a longtime producer, worked a lot with Spielberg. He's actually Kathleen Kennedy's husband. They met on the set of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but
Hmm.
it was cool actually. That he was the co-director, because I don't think he's been in front of the camera like this in years.
No,
But I
I
mean,
didn't
this
even know he was married to Kathleen Kennedy. So
yeah. So, um, we're going to get a little. I mean, it's a documentary. It's not like a movie, but we are going to get a little spoilery. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you see it.
and there's
Even if
also something that's very triggering that they touched upon in this
oh
documentary. So we will be. I want to bring that up just a
oh
little
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
bit.
But what were some of your favorite moments, or just parts of the Beach
Um,
Boys?
my favorite moments was like listening to like Mike Love and, just hearing him say like how much they really loved and enjoyed making their own music and how he loved the writing process with, going through it with Brian Wilson. I didn't really realize that they wrote most of the songs, especially the ones that really made the like number one slot. They wrote most of those. I mean, Brian Wilson wrote with so many people, and collaborated and it also surprised me that he didn't like being out on the road,
Yeah,
and that it was kind of like he would rather write the songs and produce them in the background than actually perform them in front of people. I thought that was very interesting, but yeah, just seeing them as brothers and cousins, as family, just talking about the good days, before all the drama.
yeah. Because I remember, like, the one thing I remember listening to as a young kid was, the Beach Boys didn't even surf. They sang all the surfer music, but they didn't even surf. But hearing the
Yeah.
actual, like, that Dennis, he was a drummer, he was the middle Wilson. He was the one that loved the beach
Oh,
life.
I
He
thought he
was
was the youngest.
I thought Craig was, but you might be right.
I think Dennis is the youngest, but yeah,
Okay.
he actually lived
The
the
beach
life that
life.
they were seeing. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was a surfer.
And but I mean, the fact that they pretty much started out as like a Everly Brothers folk group, but they hit the
Yeah.
harmonies, and then
Mhm.
at that time they were out, like those Dick Dell and Martin Daniels, are just that surf ventures. That music was really getting popular at the time, especially in Southern California.
Yeah.
And then when they decided, like, why don't we add our harmony to this, and
Mhm.
kind of just change the world and change music,
Oh yeah.
like, in an instant. So,
Mhm.
but I think my favorite thing was, because like I said, I've listened to them nonstop since I was a kid, and but I and I wrote this too in my post, but I am embarrassed on how
Mhm.
little I knew, or how much I didn't realize exactly how much of a musical genius Brian Wilson was.
Yeah.
And
Especially
everybody,
well,
okay,
I was just gonna say, especially when you find out that like he dropped out of school and he didn't finish school at all.
yeah,
So he was literally self-teaching himself how to write music and how to read music and how to arrange music. So he's all self-taught and making up these melodies and stuff like that.
Yeah, and not even like classically trained like some of these
Yeah.
musicians that they brought in the recording studio to be like the house band basically
Yeah.
while the band, which like I said, this was literally a tale of two bands, the
Hmm.
recording studio band, which Brian loved, then the
Hmm.
road band, which he did not like at all.
Right. Yeah.
So and that was really cool to see that dynamic. But
Yeah. And I was also surprised to see Glenn Campbell in there because
yeah,
I know Glenn Campbell as a country singer that my dad used to listen to all the time. But like when I told him about the documentary, he was like, "Oh, was Glenn Campbell in it?" Well, first he asked if John Stamos was in it, and I said,
yeah,
"No, John Stamos wasn't in it." And he was like, "What was Glenn Campbell in it?" And I was like, "Yeah, Glenn Campbell was in it." And he was like, "Oh," because I guess he was part of the house band at first. And
yeah. He was like a
then,
bassist or
yeah, and
something.
then because Brian Wilson didn't like going out on tour before Al came back, Glenn Campbell would go on tour with them. But he didn't really like the tour life either.
Well, he told a funny
At
story
first.
about his
Mhm.
first tour. He came out and these young
Women
girls
just like
just
ran
ran at
after
him
them.
and pulled out his he pulled off his shirt, and he's like, "From now on, I was always the first one in the car."
Yeah. He was like, those other guys can deal with that. I don't want to.
Yeah. Um, one thing that was really interesting because I always heard about the not necessarily rivalry, but the just
Mm,
the timing of like the Beatles when
yeah.
and the way they did this was amazing because it was like, the Beach Boys were in New Zealand and they're like,
Hmm.
"Hey, some band from Britain they're on the Ed Sullivan show." They're like, "Well, whatever." And it was the
We're
Beatles.
over here. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So, and just the fact that it turned into what seemed like a rivalry,
But they actually really
but
liked each other. Like Paul Cartney really like admired Brian Wilson's writing and stuff like that, and
yeah,
said, "Man,
which
this
they had
thing is
quotes
genius."
from Paul McCartney,
Yeah,
quotes,
he
which I
did.
thought was amazing.
But every time the Beatles would, the Beach Boys would put out something, the Beatles would put out something, and it would be like they would seem like they were trying to top each other, but like they weren't really working against each other in any way. But it was just kind of like the Spice Girls versus what other, I can't remember. It was like the Backstreet Boys versus NSYNC. Like they
Ah,
all knew each other, they all got along, but like the media and the industry would always pit them against each other.
yeah,
Trying to outdo each other. Mm,
and the one thing that really baffled me, it was what I think more than anything, they challenged each other
yeah.
to think outside the box because it was at the time the Beatles were really changing their sound.
Mm.
Then the Beach Boys
So
started
was
changing their sound,
yeah.
but it didn't work commercially as much as the
Well, I think
Beatles.
that's probably because Capitol Records was kind of playing against them because they didn't want
Yeah,
them to change their sound. So they put out a best of record, and that sold more than the actual new record that they
yeah.
wanted to sell. So I think their record company was working against them just a little bit. But
Plus Brian's dad. See, we find a lot about it.
oh my gosh.
He was an asshole. I mean, he really.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, when I told dad that, like, when Murray like sold the catalog out from underneath all of them without even Brian knowing,
Yeah,
like that was not a good move at all. And he sold it without giving Mike Love a writing credit.
yeah,
So nobody got any residuals, no money at all from any of it. And that's kind of what led to Mike suing Brian because once Brian sued whoever bought it. I don't know. I think that it went Brian sued for production rights and to get some of it, and he got some of it back, but he
yeah,
didn't get all of it. And then Mike actually sued Brian to get writing credit
yeah.
on some of the songs because he never got writing credit. And it's sad because they were cousins, and that's family suing family, and you never want that, you
And you
know?
can see the pain in Mike's
Yeah,
face.
and he said he didn't want to do it, but he had no other choice.
Yeah,
So, and I believe that. Like, he should have given him writing credit from the start, really.
yeah. And kind of and going back again, like I said, we're my age growing up with the Beach Boys, finding out that Pet Sounds was a flop of an album,
Yeah.
which isn't it blows my mind because it's probably their best album
Well,
or
like
one
I
of the
said, it was
iconic.
critically acclaimed. It was critically acclaimed. Everybody thought like
Yeah,
the musicality of it was genius. But it didn't sell the records because Capitol Records was kind of against it. They didn't want
yeah,
them changing their sound, and it was vastly different. And then that's when they put out the best of. So yeah, I could see that. And it did say at the end that like now Pet Sounds is like gold. Like
yeah.
it's making all this
Platinum,
money
triple
now.
platinum,
Yeah,
and it's considered one
but
of the greatest albums ever made.
ever made. But unfortunately, Brian Wilson has all these mental issues and messed up from drugs that I mean, he
Yeah,
doesn't really know anything.
yeah. His brain is definitely
It's pretty
fried.
fried. It's pretty fried.
But
Unfortunately.
I mean, you gotta be to come up with some of the melodies that he was coming up with because
I mean,
they
he even said that he was like in the 70s when they were making, I think, Pet Sounds or the one right before it or something like that. One of
uh,
the albums he was on LSD for. He was like, and he was on uppers. He was taking all these, uppers because he didn't feel like he had the stamina. He admitted it
yeah.
in the documentary. So,
Um Now one thing is as they're getting older, they're kind of changing, but they like you said, the company didn't want them to change, but they,
yeah.
creatively they were,
Yeah.
but they decided to miss out on a major music festival that literally America changed at the same time this
Yeah.
music festival changed, which was the time that they were trying to change. So, I mean, this would have even at the time probably would have skyrocketed them to where they were going because them and the Beatles were a little bit ahead of the times, ahead of the curve,
Yeah.
simultaneously. But
hmm
yeah, it was just one
Yeah.
of
And
those
then the
sucker
Vietnam
things.
War happened. So,
Yeah, the
it goes from like the early 60s where they're on top to the late 60s where like it becomes uncool to listen to the Beach Boys. Their sound is changing, but not in the way that everybody else's sound is changing. Like everybody else's sound is getting more political and more like charged and like more hippie like,
yeah,
and their sound went the other direction. They were not talking about the war. They weren't talking about those kind of things. They were making other statements, I guess, is a way to put it, I
yeah,
guess.
and kind of going with not only the political stuff, but they were kind of going. They would have been considered closer to like the peace and love part, like the hippie generation,
hmm
not as hippy dippy, but still, you know.
Yeah.
But
But the one thing that I did find interesting, and it just kind of popped out more to me because I was watching an HBO documentary series just recently about cults.
yeah,
That Dennis Wilson kind of was in the Laurel Canyon scene in the 70s, in that time where Charles Manson was very up and coming.
yeah,
And that was like, holy crap. That kind of connected in a way that I didn't know at all. I didn't know he went to those parties when they were out here in LA. Um, Not the whole group. I think this was around the time where like Brian Wilson was so depressed about the Pet Sounds, I think. And he wasn't really doing anything with the band. He was like very depressed. He wouldn't come out of his bed. So his middle brother was running the band, and Dennis was, the younger brother was trying to be more proactive and writing songs and stuff like that. And so as he was getting into the Laurel Canyon scene, and he befriended Charles Manson, um, who wanted to be a songwriter and a performer. He wanted to get into the entertainment industry before he went completely nuts. And uh, Dennis was the one who introduced him to Terry,
the
which
producer.
was a producer. And he was the one that said, no, you're not going to make it in this industry. And luckily, he moved from the place that he was living because he would have ended up like the Tate murders. But yeah, but unfortunately, Dennis, it was said in the documentary that Dennis felt very responsible for introducing him to Terry and for allowing that night to happen.
Yeah, because it's one of the most
Horrific
nights in Hollywood and just entertainment history. And
Yeah.
to find out that he was a branch of that, I mean, and the way they.
And that they collaborated and wrote a song, and it's on one of the Beach Boys
like B-sides.
B-sides.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, like that was the biggest thing that stood out to me about this documentary, besides the fact that Murray, the dad, sold the catalog out from underneath them, and they got 700,000 for what could be billions today.
Yeah, because I know I started getting, I don't say like a weird feeling, but like when they're at this part and they said like Dennis was like really, into meditating, and when they get to, he'd like do group meditations with a band and had the guru. And once they mentioned the guru, I was like, uh-oh.
I was like, oh God, no.
Are they going? Because they said
went there.
But once they said that he picked up 2 hitchhikers, I was like, whoa, they're not. Then he's like, yeah, we have our own guru. And I was like, and then they showed the picture. I was like, wow.
Yeah, as soon as I heard we have our own guru, I was like, oh, and like I knew it from the moment they said he was a part of the Laurel Canyon scene.
Yeah,
I knew it immediately. Immediately they were going there, and I was like, oh my gosh.
I mean, we're both big fans of like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, so a lot of this stuff's kind of like fresh, at least to me. And obviously,
I mean, it is fresh from that, and then also if you go on HBO, they have a whole documentary like series called The People Investigates, and there's a whole series about cults, and they did a whole episode on Charles Manson and the Manson family. So I had just watched that because for some reason I went down that rabbit hole. I didn't mean to, but I did. And yeah. But, that was a very surprising connection that was just very recent in what I've been watching. So
and I'm watching this like, dude, I'm surprised there has not been like a true Beach Boys biopic, because this is like, but I enjoy these documentaries more because you're getting the real stories from the voices. But I'm a big fan of biopics, but I'm watching this thing like this is a movie. You know, who would be playing who,
Exactly. Yeah.
But like you said, it got really dark.
It did.
And it's like, how are they going to get out of this darkness? And then the thing that we kind of bring up that, they're kind of Capitol Records keeps, release their first greatest hits. While they decided after 20 something years, hey, we're going to release Endless Summer, which was one of my first Beach Boys CDs after I had numerous tapes.
Okay.
And this was at the time, the ultimate Beach Boys collection. And it blew up because now you got a new audience. And like we said earlier, that, this is a time where you hear the Beach Boys, you're ready for summer, you're ready to have fun, the windows down, play in the sun. And so I think somebody said it perfectly. This was the beginning of the 8 to 80.
Yeah, the 8 to 80. I was just going to bring that up. Yeah. Where you have 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds in the same stadium listening to the same music because it speaks to everybody.
Exactly. And this is what they were doing that the Beatles weren't doing. And this was tours and live performances.
Yeah.
And so this is where they really just got that second, third wind, and they were nonstop playing, the old stuff.
Yeah.
And
which now bands do all the time.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's what they do in Vegas. That's what the Vegas
residencies are about.
People want to hear the old stuff. So and so the way they ended it like on a high note, and then all these albums going platinum and was just,
they ended it with everybody getting back together at like Brian Wilson on a beach, and I was just like, oh, it was the beach where they're back together.
Yeah, it was the same beach where the first album was photographed at. That they showed a couple times, and even so, Mike's like, we haven't even seen each other in years, so you can genuinely see that was the first time.
But like, what really got me is like when Mike Love like kind of broke down when he was talking about like how he had to sue his cousin for the lyrics rights,
Yeah.
And I don't think he had spoken to him since that happened or something like that. Because Brian Wilson, even when like the Beach Boys were on the like on Full House and when they were on Home Improvement, they
Yeah.
weren't. Brian Wilson was never a part of it. I don't believe. I think it was everybody else
Yeah.
except Brian Wilson. I can't remember, but I don't think I ever saw Brian Wilson on an episode.
Yeah, I don't remember. I'm trying to. Yeah, he wasn't in Kokomo. He wasn't in any of that.
Mm-mm.
Which I'm glad they ended the closing credits with Kokomo,
Yeah,
because
I
that's
was
such a big
like,
part of our childhood. You know.
mm-hmm. Especially with like the Muppets singing it,
Yeah, yeah.
which is
So
how that connects to the next documentary, really.
yeah. Well, well, even before that, I mean,
Yeah.
I just want to say I was really blown away.
I really
By
enjoyed watching
this.
the documentary, and it did bring to light some things, and really was surprising things too. So,
Yeah. Any favorite Beach Boy songs?
oh,
Any go tos?
I I love Kokomo, really.
Oh yeah.
But I do have to think that like Surfing USA, I always love. That's a good one, and Good Vibrations.
Good Vibrations is one of my
Yeah.
go tos. Um, I like Forever. It's one of their lesser
Yeah,
known, but
I love Forever. I
it's a
mean,
great
I
one.
know I learned it from Uncle Jesse on Full House, but when Dennis was singing Forever in the documentary, I was like, "Oh, I love this
Yeah,
song."
and
So
you always,
definitely Forever.
and I remember always seeing just Mike Love and Brian doing the singing, but they really showed everybody singing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Everybody
somebody,
had some chops of singing.
yeah, and I forget, it was one of the producers. It might have been I think it was the guy from Fleetwood Mac that was
Oh, okay.
but he was like, you take one of their vocals out and they wouldn't have been the same. Like
Yeah.
they were
Mhm.
all that. And quick
Exactly.
shout out, Brian Wilson does have a Disney CD, Music in the Key of Disney,
Oh, okay.
which is it's just him singing Disney songs, and it's pretty cool.
Oh,
It's relaxing. So it's on
oh good.
Spotify. So check that out.
Check it
Um,
out.
another song, and this will lead into our another lead into our uh
Next one.
next one, but I also love um God Only Knows,
Oh,
uh
okay. Mhm.
that song. And the reason it leads into the next one is because it was featured on the Muppets of Mayhem. They were singing that song. So um
Yes.
as if you guys did not guess yet, yes, we're moving on to the Jim Henson documentary,
Yes.
Idea Man, which
Idea
was
Man.
directed by Ron Howard. So
Oh, beautifully directed by Ron
oh
Howard.
yeah. I'll let you start on this one because I feel like I'm
Uh,
just blabbing too much. But we saw these back. I did it yesterday. You did today, but they're
yeah.
back to back. But
That we did it back to back.
what were your
This
thoughts?
one, oh my goodness. Absolutely love this one. I didn't know too much about Jim Henson. My initial like exposure to Jim Henson was Sesame Street. I think
Yeah,
that's really all of our first. I don't know about you, but it might have been Yoda in Star Wars, but
yeah. It was the Muppet
no.
Show at Sesame Street.
Okay, the Muppet Show, and I love the Muppet Show Tonight. So I was of the era of like the newer Muppet shows,
Yeah,
but I knew of the old ones, just because like my parents they got married in 77, so my dad was watching a lot of that stuff, so he used to watch the Muppet Show too. But he knew that the Muppets from Saturday Night Live, like,
yeah,
and I was like, what are you talking about? Until I started rewatching when we first got Peacock, I started rewatching Saturday Night Live from the very beginning because all of the episodes are on Peacock.
yeah.
And
Not a
yeah,
paid.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, but yeah, the very first episode of Saturday Night Live, you have Jim Henson's Muppets on there, and they're the ugliest things. They're the monsters and the rocks, and they're completely different from Sesame Street or Kermit and the Gang.
Yeah.
Like completely different. And they're raunchier. They're vulgar. They're wonderful. I love them. But that was but the Sesame Street was definitely my first foray into the Muppets with Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch and Grover and the Count Dracula.
Yeah. So mine was, I think, even, I mean, I grew up watching Sesame Street. I mean, what kid didn't? But
Yeah.
yeah, it was definitely the Muppet Show, which were, I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old where they're brand new.
Yeah.
I was watching the syndicated ones, but I was watching, the Muppet movie, The Great Muppet Caper, Muppets Take Manhattan as a
And I've
kid
already,
before.
yeah. And as one of my favorite movies growing up was Muppet Treasure Island. So I was
Yeah.
very much aware of the Muppets. I remember when Disney would be free certain weekends. They would play, like they mentioned, the Princess and the Frog, like the Frog Prince,
Yeah.
that he tried to do with Kermit, and like one, I remember watching that. I remember watching Sweetums come around the castle and stuff like that. I have memories of those types of movies, but you can't see them anywhere today. I don't know why, but you
Yeah.
can't get those kinds. But they played on the Disney Channel all the time when it was a subscription based service and you had to pay for it. But once it became part of cable, like they didn't play those things anymore because the channel had evolved.
Yeah.
So it was only around the time when you had to pay for Disney, where you could see those things. And I never saw the Dark Crystal or Labyrinth when I was younger. I was shown them when I lived in Bakersfield, so I saw them in my adult life. They scared the living crap out of me. They didn't make any sense. Labyrinth is a cult classic now, but like it makes no sense to me. But the puppets are great.
Yeah. And
um,
yeah, they even hit that point that because those were considered failures box
yeah.
office.
Mm-hmm.
And but then, at the end when they kind of give you a little recap, it mentions how both of those are considered classics now, but
Classics now.
they're more cult classics than actual like
They're
classic
cults, yeah.
classics.
They're definitely cult classics now. I know Netflix tried to revive the Dark Crystal, but yeah, I don't think it went past one season because it's expensive because they have to do the creature shop and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
you have to do the puppets and stuff. I loved dinosaurs. I wish there was more material from the dinosaurs TV shows because Jim Henson, I mean, I think that was more Brian Henson afterwards, but
Yeah.
like,
Well, we found out like, and we're going to just jump a little bit.
Yeah.
This has only been out for a few days, so again, spoiler alert. But
Yeah.
we haven't really talked about the documentary much. We're just kind of our background with like Jim Henson and the Muppets. But I'm just going to fast forward a little bit to where we meet Brian. He actually gets on set for Labyrinth, and finding out that he was the tinkerer, which basically he's the one that kind of started the animatronics into the mask, like what we see in the Ninja Turtles, dinosaurs, a lot of these other shows that have been coming out. So that was very cool, that the fact that he was one of the ones that developed that. But one thing I thought that was really cool is, they show Jim, like, what, well, one thing you'd assume, because we know people that work in puppetry and stuff, and it's just people either they do it as a kid and they just grow into it or they just love it. He was never a puppeteer. He just wanted to be in TV and was trying to do anything that would get him into TV, and which I thought was really cool. And at the time, somebody was looking for, puppeteers for a TV show, a late night like public access. So he's like, well, this is how I'm going to get into TV, and Kermit out of his mom's coat and a ping pong ball and a couple other stuff with his then girlfriend.
And he sold stuff, and he was in advertising. He sold stuff with the puppets. did commercials. And yeah, he started the company with his soon-to-be wife, girlfriend. Um, it seems like they had more of a marriage of convenience, is what it sounded like. But I think to some degree she loved him and he loved her. So,
Yeah.
um, but like he even went away to Europe and did the Muppet Show, and then he came back and then was like, "Okay, we're gonna get married," and was like, "Wait, how? I thought you broke up with her? Like, I don't understand." But okay,
Yeah.
that kind of took a jump in the documentary where like they were together and then they decided to see other people, and then all of a sudden he went to Europe and then he came back and says, "Okay, we're gonna get married," and like, wait, what?
And that was an interesting part too, because it's like, why go to Europe? But like they mentioned that there's such a bigger appreciation for puppeteering
Well, he
than,
knew a guy that was a head of a studio,
well, that was
and
before that
oh,
a
I
little
thought
bit.
okay.
So
I thought he went over there because the guy said he has 2 empty studios he needs to fill.
yeah, he did that. He went to like Paris.
Oh, but he
For
did go and sketch. Like he wanted to do art
Yeah,
before that.
he was very
Okay, yeah.
visual.
That was
And
the time that I was talking about. Is like, yeah, he went and did art in Europe and then came back and was like, "We're gonna get married." And then he went
yeah,
back to Europe to do
and
the Muppet
then
Show.
but he was very creative and very inventive, and so
Yeah.
he was doing these like projection shows for a nightclub.
Yeah, he invented the sphere before the sphere became
Yeah,
a thing.
pretty much.
The sphere is in Las Vegas and it's just this projection thing.
Yeah. So he came up with that. Then a TV producer wanted to was realizing at the time that there was not very kid friendly kid shows. Even
Yeah.
cartoons are starting to get a little too violent and
Yeah.
crazy and wonky, and then they like, well, they brought in anybody from writers to producers to, hey, this guy worked with puppets, let's bring him in and collaborate. And
Mhm.
this is like I don't know, growing up, it's almost like at least me, always assumed that he wanted to do educational stuff for kids, and that wasn't really his goal.
No, it wasn't. He
And
just
but
kind of
he
fell into that.
Yeah, but then he had a they said that one thing that really got into it was I think the youngest son wasn't
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah, John, the youngest son, John, he
Yeah.
had a learning disability, or I think that's what they called it in the documentary.
Yeah.
And he learned to talk slower, like at a slower pace than all the rest of the kids. So, um, then he really wanted to find some way to help him learn and dig into how the different ways kids learn,
Yeah.
how to talk
Pacing,
the
or
pacing, just how to grow up basically. And so
yeah.
that's how Sesame Street came about, is
Yeah, and what I
teaching
had
kids.
yeah, and I had no idea that a lot of the videos and cartoons were actually Jim Henson, because I was like,
I
hey,
know.
we'll let you cook,
Mhm.
if you want to be part of the show, because one of my favorite things was the pinball cartoon.
Oh yeah, the
1, 2,
pinball.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I used to love
And
that.
I remembered, I was looking at the documentary, I was like, I remember the King of Eight.
Yeah.
And everything had to add up to 8. I remember
Yeah.
watching that short.
And I think somebody mentioned it too, that like Jim didn't do drugs, but he was very into the like psychedelic art and stuff.
Yeah.
And just because his brain is so
Yeah, he's like,
creative.
he loved what it did, but he didn't partake himself.
Yeah. And so then, they did the street, but the street, it was kind of boring. So then that's how
Yeah.
they came up with like Big Bird and Oscar and,
I
kind of like
love Big Bird.
oh yeah. And
Big
we'll get
Bird
to
was
that
one of my
later.
favorites. I know, but Big Bird was still
But,
even one of my favorites. Like
oh
even
yeah.
when I was watching Sesame Street, I loved Big Bird.
Oh, Big Bird's awesome. I love the movie Follow That Bird. I don't know if you
Oh
ever seen that.
yeah. Oh, I still followed that bird
Love that
a lot
movie.
of
No,
times.
Big Bird's amazing.
Yeah.
And it was a predecessor for the Big Bear in the Big Blue House. Is that same
Mm-hmm.
style of
Yeah.
puppeteering, the full body,
The full body one. Yeah.
and just the different styles of puppeteering they would do. And and everything. But then he was like, he still wanted to do the variety show, which it sounds funny that nobody wanted to do it.
I know. I was
And
like, how do you not? It's the 70s. How do you not want to do a variety show when everybody's doing a variety show?
yeah,
Like,
and
come
with
on.
puppets, and then that's when the trip to Europe has that
Mhm.
connection with the one guy with a
That
studio.
probably explains why most of the human like guest stars were British at first. And
Yeah,
it was all British like celebrities.
yeah, and he pretty much gave them free reign to do
Whatever
what
they
they
wanted.
wanted, and boom, we got the
Yeah.
Muppet Show, classic,
Yeah.
And it's funny because I did not realize that the Muppet Show was like, a lot of these shows, like, okay, we they kind of lose their wares, and they're not wear. That's not even a
Yeah.
term, I think, but lose their oomph.
Yeah.
But it was at the height. Like every year they kept getting
Yeah.
better, better. He's like, okay, I'm done.
I
I'm
know he
done.
was just like, okay, I'm canceling it. I'm like, what? You can't just cancel it when it's at the top of its game.
Yeah, because the
But he
creativity
did.
is done at this time. The fact that they had to shoo away
Yeah.
celebrities because they
They
had no
said
room
they
for
had
them.
more celebrities than what they had of shows, so they
Yeah,
couldn't accept anymore. And I was like, well, you could have kept it going on and you could have had those celebrities, but you
yeah.
didn't want to keep it going on. So,
And this is why I think, especially around the Muppet Show is when we started getting a little bit of signs of the marriage kind of faltering. And I think
yeah.
I don't think the
Well, he
love
was
never
going
ended,
back and
but
forth a
yeah,
lot from Europe to New York. And when he was, but like, not only was he like trying to balance family and like two different like jobs basically, but like in two different areas. And when he wasn't in Europe, he was in New York, but he was working on Sesame Street because he was the voice of Kermit. He was the
yeah,
voice of Ernie. Like
yeah,
Ernie was almost in every episode that I remember. So like he was constantly working on Sesame Street, and then he was the voice of Kermit, and he was a lot of the voices, in the Muppet Show. So
yeah,
it wasn't just him directing or producing these shows. He was actually acting in them, and he was the voices of a lot of characters. So he was completely always busy. And his wife Jane, who co-founded the company with him, she really wanted him back home. And
yeah. With the four young
with
kids,
the
obviously.
kids. Yeah, with the five of them.
The five, yeah,
Yeah, five kids. And um he'd rather work. He was a workaholic. And they did say in the documentary that his mom was a Christian Scientist, and or his dad was one of his parents was a Christian Scientist.
I think it was his mom. Then the dad, like,
Was just
not
like
converted, but he liked her
Yeah,
so
I
much.
think they just said he converted a little bit, but didn't really follow it to a T. And Christian Scientists don't believe in Western medicine. They don't believe in doctors at all. So that's kind of what killed him, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Not that he was a Christian Scientist, because they never really said he believed in it, but he did believe in a higher power. He just wasn't like they didn't classify him as any kind of religion. But the fact that like he was so busy that he never went to the doctor, and he never and that was like his last resort.
yeah.
And I kind of feel like those beliefs is what killed him.
I think that, and I don't say he was procrastinating, but I think his brain was going so much that he's like, no, I got it. I'll do it after I do
I'll
this.
do
But
it
then
later.
once he
Yeah.
did this, then he was on to something else.
Yeah.
But
And he just never had time to go to the doctor. He was always busy doing something, really.
yeah,
Is what ultimately is what it was. But I mean, growing up in that, I mean, I've had friends that were, had Christian Scientism in their family, and they watched it, kill their aunt, aunts and uncles. So
yeah,
it is really serious to believe that. To
yeah,
believe that's a belief of not believing in Western medicine. I mean,
yeah,
there is other ways to deal with it. Like, I'm not saying that go to the doctor is the end all be all, because like even I have issues going to the doctor. So like, I'm not really one to say, but like I do think that him growing up in that household of Christian Scientists and believing that like, oh well, that's a last resort, like maybe I'll go to the doctor, but only if I have to, you know what I mean? They just
Yeah.
weren't.
I don't know. I personally, I think I took it as he was too busy.
Okay.
But that, I mean,
Either
potato,
one
potato,
is true. I mean, it's basically the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
he was really busy. But I think that maybe that's the underlying,
Yeah.
like, it back in the back of his mind, not really at the forefront. Because I'm sure the busy schedule wasn't helping anything.
Yeah.
You know.
One thing that I loved was the relationship with him and Frank Oz.
Yes, the
And
brother.
especially when they couldn't figure out Bert and Ernie, and
Yeah.
Jim was Bert, Frank was Ernie.
Was Ernie.
It didn't work, so they
Yeah.
switched. And
Mm-hmm.
then, which they're more their personalities. And then you really saw like Jim and Ernie use Ernie as more of a platform of that's him and more silly and
He could be
goofy.
crazy.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
then Frank was like stiff, and that's what he did with. That's how he
Bert.
played Bert, and especially with the
Yeah.
part like, just counting something, then Ernie's going to just bug him, and that was the whole, and
Yeah.
that was the shtick for the entire time, and
It really was,
yeah, and even watching it as adults is still funny,
It is. It's
it still hits.
hilarious. Yeah.
So, and then of
I
course,
love Bert and Ernie.
oh yeah, and of course, moving towards the Muppets, it just kind of reminded me. They got two Jim Henson Funko Pops, and one of them is him with a Kermit, and the other one is him with Ernie. I don't know where that came from. I just
Oh, I
his
didn't
two
know that. That's kind of
personalities.
cool.
Yeah.
Huh. Kermit and Ernie.
But one thing that we did get was, like he said, he was always inventing something or inventive. So he wanted to do the Muppets like a movie.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh yeah, we'll get a bigger studio. He's like, no, I want to film outside in elements and
In the real world.
yeah, and the studio's like, no, we can never do that. So him and Frank went out on their own and did live video of just them petting cows and driving, and it works. And I mean, that's
It
what makes
worked.
the movie so great is
Yeah.
they're out in the real elements.
The only thing is Jim had to be like scrunched up in a canister underwater
I know. For
to film
an iconic scene.
Yeah, to be like, because it's for the scene where Kermit is sitting on a log and he's singing the Rainbow Connection, and it's the opening scene of the movie.
Yeah.
And that's Jim Henson underwater in a canister, scrunched up with his hand up above him, singing Rainbow Connection.
And which is such, I mean, you don't think of it as a kid, when you're watching the movie, but thinking of it now, it's like that scene, you only got so much time for the audience to buy in the Muppets in the real world.
Yeah.
Because we're so used to them in the theater and, doing all that. But you got this giant aerial shot coming down, you hear the music, then you see them zooming in on Kermit on a log in a swamp. And you don't see
nothing else.
You don't see the wires from and him strumming, which is the cool thing about the movies. I mean, those are all gone compared to like the TV shows. And and you got to really believe within the first like 2 or 3 minutes, and you're hooked. And I mean, and even the part where, like in the later movies when they're riding bikes, in the park or
driving a car.
Yeah. So, always inventive.
Yeah, but Frank Oz was there from the beginning and right there by Jim.
Yeah. Then we get to, like you said, the creepy stuff where he wanted to do something different and, does Dark Crystal, which I was scared of Dark Crystal as a kid.
Okay. I knew somebody was going to be.
I mean, they're pretty creepy. But it's just funny how, I mean, the movie, the studios bombed it, but because they didn't have English, they're speaking in beeps and honks and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was like, what the hell? You can't not
they did say that they redubbed it so that people could understand it.
So then even goes and more ambitious and mixing more live action with these same more and higher technical puppets and Labyrinth. Plus, you got David Bowie, you got Jennifer
Yeah.
Conley,
Mhm.
and then you got,
They
like we
actually
said,
interviewed Jennifer Connelly, which was
yeah.
awesome. I was
Oh,
like, "Oh."
I didn't even get to that, but yeah, I mean, I
Mhm.
mentioned Frank Oz, but we get great interviews from like his kids, his daughters, and
Mhm.
Brian. Which I mean, growing up, I'm a big fan of Brian Henson because he's
Yeah.
been around, done so much. But
He's
we
done
get
all of our childhood, like from the
yeah,
Muppet Christmas Carol, Muppet Treasure Island, all of the newer Muppets
yeah,
is all Brian Henson. So,
and then we get interviews with like Jennifer Connelly, Rita Moreno from West Side
mhm.
Story, because
Yeah.
that was I remember her episode when she was singing with Animal. She her
I think
little
her episode is the most iconic one, I think.
that
One of
one,
the most iconic.
the Raquel Welch one. Of course, I'm going to say the Mark Hamill one because I got that one on
Yeah.
DVD.
Well,
Uh,
Star Wars, yeah.
they're all classic, but it's
They
funny
really are.
because
But I
that
think
episode
hers won something, right?
it might have won an Emmy.
I think it's iconic because it like was one of the first ones to win something.
Yeah,
Can't remember right now, but I think it won something. I'm not sure.
but I always say how foreshadowing the Muppet Show was because the Mark Hamill episode has the finale where they're it's like CB3PO's tap dancing and Chewbacca's dancing and Gonzo is Darth Vader or Darth Gonzo, and
Darth
but
Gonzo.
so you got the Muppets, or you got Star Wars, then you got the Muppets, and the finale is When You Wish Upon a Star, and it's like Disney owns Star Wars, they own the Muppets.
Muppets. Yeah.
It's a Disney song,
Disney owns everything.
and that was back in 1980 is when that episode came out. I think 79 or 80, but
Yeah.
um, so
They
yeah, great.
even, they even went so far as to show the Muppets being put into MGM Studios.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
when they were going to open up that one in '89.
yeah, because before, yeah, because he sells the company to Disney because he loved going to Disney World, and they definitely
Yeah.
throw those in there. But yeah, I was gonna say it was funny because yeah, I was wondering like that's random. I mean, of course Jennifer Connelly was in Labyrinth, but they got her to interview. But I'm like, but Ron Howard directed her in A Beautiful Mind, so it was probably an easy phone call.
It was probably an easy phone call. Yeah. I mean, if Ron Howard calls you for anything, it's an easy phone call, right?
Yeah,
Ron
Ron,
Howard.
I'll give you my number, Ron.
Yeah. Please call us.
But I mean, I'm kind of going from that to that Labyrinth to Disney. I mean, again, Labyrinth, Dark Crystal weren't box office hits,
It's
and he didn't. Kind of going back to Brian Wilson. When that Pet Sounds got failed, he went into depression.
depression. Yeah.
Jim Henson just went back to work. He's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, what can I do now?" And that's when they
And he said, "Let's try theme parks."
yeah, and yeah, I love, and that was the Muppet Vision 3D is actually credited as his last performance with the Muppets before he passed away.
Yes.
So that's always an iconic thing. And one thing I noticed last time I was at Disney World, we're at the Muppet Vision, and there is that Muppet around that looks like Jim Henson, but they actually have a photo of it on the top rafters of the
Oh.
waiting room.
Okay, so that would be an Easter egg to Jim Henson then.
Yeah, so I was looking up. I'm like, I went to my niece. I'm like, is that a Jim Henson Muppet? And we're like, oh my god, never even noticed that before. It's right in the top, right in the middle if you're in the waiting area. But
Okay, we'll have to see it the next time we're there. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So of course, I know I always call for more Muppet representation at the parks. I'm glad it's still in Florida. Hopefully, we could get some in Disneyland. But
hopefully.
But of course, shortly after that MGM scene, we get the death of Jim Henson.
Yeah.
The quick death, because they, like you mentioned earlier, and they mentioned about he had pneumonia before, then just kind of like
a bacterial issue that he had, and he did have walking pneumonia as well, and he didn't get it checked out in time, so he got put in the hospital. He did get to say goodbye to Jane. She came, and they put it as they had a conversation of whatever they wanted to, hash out between them. And he basically left the studio to the kids in his will, because Brian is the head of the studio
Yeah.
still. And I think one of the daughters is ahead of the Jim Henson Puppeteer Foundation. I'm not exactly what it's called, but it's a foundation that they bankroll to help make sure that the puppeteering
Yeah.
stays alive.
It's almost like a scholarship in a way
Yeah.
where they could get into like performing arts schools, but as
Exactly.
puppeteers.
Yeah.
So.
And but they did it, and then they found in his will like specific instructions on how his funeral was supposed to be run.
Oh, geez, this scene.
And he won.
Oh, go ahead.
No, just go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, I mean this scene of his funeral. It's like you're in tears, but you're smiling.
Yeah. He wanted it to be a happy occasion. So he had like circus performers. He wanted people who could sing to sing songs.
Everybody had like butterflies on sticks that they could kind of puppeteer.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we had an appearance from Big Bird, who sang "It's Not Easy Being Green," which put me into tears.
Yeah.
Just because like he had sang the song as Kermit earlier in the documentary, and they were kind of like alluding to like that was his like civil rights kind of song.
Yeah.
That it's not easy being like, if you're African American, it's not easy being African American. If you're Jewish, it's not easy being Jewish. It's just kind of like Kermit's song for it's not
whatever
easy.
you're going through. It's not easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Being you if you're going through something.
Yeah,
regardless.
But it was around that same time, so that's why I say it's like a civil rights song.
Oh no, yeah.
But like song sang by a frog.
Yeah.
But having Big Bird sing it was, emotional.
And just having Brian reading the everything
The will.
with everybody around him, and he's like, "These are my last wishes. I know nobody will give me any crap because I'm not here to take it or something."
They had a little chuckle about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so nobody can not fight me on it because I'm not there to fight or something like that. It was very, like I said, you're in tears but you're smiling because And I brought it up to that before we were recording, but the Andy Kaufman movie Man on the Moon, he did the same thing where he had a video playing at his funeral of himself leading a little sing along to everybody there. So actually,
funny.
It might have been a song from Sesame Street.
Really?
What was that one about smiling?
When you're smiling?
Oh, I can't think of it right now.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh wow, this is bad recording. I'm sorry, people, but but then it end. I mean, the way they end everything was great. Then I mean, the Frank Oz.
Yeah.
His.
I hope that Ron Howard gives Frank Oz the Disney Legend Award.
Ah,
that would be awesome. Just because Jim Henson's not here. I mean, Jim Henson's not going to be there to give it to him. I mean, maybe George Lucas, but I don't know, because somebody always gives them the award. So I wonder, that would be cool if Ron Howard came out, because he just did this documentary. So who else better to give Frank Oz the Disney Legend Award?
Yeah, the second puppeteer to get that award since Jim Henson.
Yeah.
So, another damn good documentary. I mean, this was a crazy weekend. So I know we're about an hour or so, but
just know that Disney Plus has lots of good original documentaries.
Oh yeah, I was going to shout some out, but I just want to see if you had any final thoughts on either one of these. What do you think the rewatchability?
I think the Jim Henson one has more rewatchability. But I mean, all documentaries could be rewatched if you want to rewatch them. But I would say out of the two, Jim Henson's has more rewatchability for me, I think.
Yeah, I think they both do for me. The Beach Boys does have an album on Spotify and Apple Music, so some of the rough cuts and stuff are on it. So that's pretty cool. So
Awesome.
check that out. If you don't have any other Beach Boys music for some reason, you should. But like I said, these Disney Plus documentaries have been bangers. They do them for movies, they do them for TVs, they do them for Imagineers. Since the Imagineering story, which is probably one of the greatest ones,
Yeah.
directed by Leslie Iwerks, narrated by
Angela Bassett.
thank you. I was like,
Yeah.
but like this was one of the staples when Disney Plus was released. It's a 6-parter. I know we always talk about it on Walt's Apartment, when they need to add another one. I think they still got to finish stuff first, but
Yeah.
another one they have is Behind the Attraction, which is a more modern version. So,
and actually they kind of have started doing, we call it Imagineering, but it's on YouTube.
yeah.
So they only have 2 episodes out right now, and it's more about like what they're doing with Tiana's Bayou Adventure and like what they're doing now with like Country Bears and stuff like that. So they kind of fast forward a little bit, but they didn't put it on Disney Plus. They put it on YouTube. So that's something to look out for too. But like the Assembled is like, that is what they're calling the behind the scenes of every Marvel movie. It's not every one of them, but like a lot of them have a behind the scenes now, especially the newer ones. So you can go and see that. There's even an Assembled from X-Men 97 that I still need to watch. And even the Star Wars content has the like Mandalorian Gallery.
Yeah, the Star Wars
series.
Gallery, which the season 1 of the Mandalorian Gallery was so. The other ones have been like one long episode. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Season 2 and 3 had just been like an hour long. But the way they did the first season, like one was about the directors, the second one was about the actors, the third one was about the music. Mm-hmm. It was so awesome. And
they did that really well. I know they tried to do it again with like season 2, but it just wasn't as good. But it's good behind the scenes stuff. It's just, it wasn't like presented as well.
Well, because season 2 had to wait. They did the full season minus Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
So spoiler alert if you haven't seen season 2 of The Mandalorian.
So we didn't get to see the behind the scenes of how they did that.
But that was the second part that came in later. So but yeah, the gallery, you said Assembled. They had a great one for Mickey's 90th birthday. The Mickey Story of a Mouse.
Story of a Mouse.
That was a really good one. That they went to places, they did some of the dark times of Mickey and Walt, which I was surprised. So, but I appreciate that. But one of the greatest ones too was Get Back. That was the Beatles one. There's 2 Beatles documentaries. There's Get Back, which was directed by Peter Jackson. So of course it's going to be long as hell. I mean, it was in 3 parts, and each part was like 3 hours long. Dang. But it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was literally being a fly on the wall for a month with the Beatles.
Yeah. Wow.
Recording their final album, Let It Be. And then Let It Be is another newer documentary that's just about that one. I think there's a documentary, Abbey Road, of the music that was recorded at Abbey Road, not just the Beatles.
Oh, maybe. Oh, okay.
But no, that's some good stuff. Plus, I mean, these are the Disney Plus documentaries, but they have some other ones like the Pixar Story. These are ones that have been out for years. Empire Dreams, the original Star Wars,
Waking,
trilogy.
Sleeping Beauty, The Boys, all of that.
Mm-hmm. Howard.
Howard. That's definitely a good documentary.
Yeah. So I didn't know if we'd have a long enough show to talk about that, but we literally talked an hour on just 2 of them, and then we were going to talk more about these ones. But that's just go out and watch them. They're a lot of fun. So
and there is an Instagram account that Disney has put out called Disney Orig Docs. It's Disney and then ORIG and then Docs, DOCS. That's where they're going to promote all their documentaries, I believe. I mean, I don't think they would put out a Instagram account if they weren't. So they've already been promoting both documentaries, Beach Boys and Jim Henson on that account as well as other ones. Now they seem to tie in like concerts, like the like Encanto at the Hollywood Bowl,
Yeah.
but I don't really count those as documentaries unless I don't know, unless they show behind the scenes of that. But yeah, that's all on that Instagram account.
Well, awesome. Well, that was fun to
Well,
talk
yeah.
about. And like I said, if you guys have not seen the Beach Boys or Idea Man, gotta check them out. They're so cool. So
Mm-hmm.
they'll get the emotions going
Yes.
for sure. So, but yeah, hope you enjoyed our rambling about
Yeah.
that and Disney Plus documentaries. That's why I love this that that me and you are doing this, because you know we're talking about stuff that we enjoy, but kind of seem that aren't getting as much views as like the Marvel and Star Wars content, but
Yeah.
because there is a lot of great stuff on Disney Plus that kind of gets
There
overlooked.
is.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, and
And
I
we don't
love
want it to go away. So
absolutely, and I love the trend. Like I said, Beatles, Peter Jackson, Beach Boys, Frank Marshall, Jim Henson, Ron Howard.
Ron
I mean, these
Howard.
are. I love this trend of these iconic filmmakers, giving us stories of things we love. So,
Yeah.
um,
It's great.
yeah, but we got some fun content coming your way, pretty much all summer. So,
Yeah.
definitely be sure to subscribe. I should have said that earlier, but subscribe, like, share, comment if you like on this video or our other videos. Let us know what you think. Let us know if there's anything you'd like us to cover. We are taking requests, so you can email us at elementsoffunyt@gmail. If you follow us on our socials, let us know, and because we are on socials. So and yeah. So anything you want to
That's it.
add? Or, that's all, folks. Oh, wrong sign. I'm just kidding.
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, we might have
No.
some Warner Brothers content here real shortly. A little
Yeah.
tease on that. So,
Mm-hmm.
but we will be back very soon with another fun show with a lot of elements. We don't have a really good sign off yet, but we're
No,
getting
we
there.
don't. Mm.
She's looking
We
at me
need to
like,
find it.
yeah, you should have just stopped about a minute ago. But so I will do that now. So
See you real soon.
perfect. Good night, everybody.